Visiting in the home of someone for our oral history project. This is Ray Mofield speaking. We're in Hardin, and we're in the residence of Mrs. Eva Gardner. It's a real pleasure to be in your home, and thanks for inviting us on our WCBL program.
Well, thank you. Glad to have you.
Ms. Gardner, we always start out and ask a little bit about your background. I believe you came here from Alabama,
That's right.
but it was a day or two ago.
Yeah, just a few days. Well, I came in 1922, Ray.
And you were the milliner?
That is right. I worked for the Hardin Mercantile Company, and at that time we had two milliners here. There was Miss Lillian Kello that worked for the Ryan Miller Company, and I worked for the Hardin Mercantile. And I'll have to tell you a little joke on me there. I came here, you know, every state has a little thing, like say in Alabama, if we had a date, he was going to carry us, so-and-so. In Mississippi, they were going to tote them. And so I fixed a hat for a lady, and it wasn't an expensive hat, you know, just an inexpensive. So we had sacks to put those in, boxes for the other. And I put it in the sack, and she said, I'll pack it. And I said, no. So I took it out of that, and I put it in the box, put the tissue paper around it, you know, just like we did the nice hats. And she says, I'll pack it. Well, I went through that 3 times, and I turned to get something, and when I did, she said, I'll pack it, and she had it going down the steps, and I knew then what she meant. That she would take
English varies in these United States.
Yes, that's right. I'll declare it is something else. But the millinery, Ray, back then, on Saturday was just like Tater Day here. Of course, nearly everybody used the horse and wagon. And, I'll tell you, there's more stick candy sold that day than any other day. But it was a thriving business.
Yes.
At that time. We did a good business here. I sold hats to Benton, to Murray, and all around. I felt quite complimented to think they'd come buy one of my homemade hats.
Well, a lady in Benton today said to me, where are you going next? And I said, I'm going down to Hardin, and I'm going to see Miss Eva Gardner.
Uh-huh.
She said, oh, those are the most beautiful hats I ever saw.
Well, I'll thank her. And it was right funny. I was in the hospital, and a lady was in my roommate, you know, and she said, somebody came in and they said, are you Eva Gardner? And I said, yes, I am. She said, Eva Gardner? I said, yes. She said, you sold me my wedding hat.
Well, the store, yeah, there were 2 giant stores in
yes.
Hardin.
Yes, there were.
And I can remember, when I remember that store, it was called Davenport Brothers.
Yeah. Well, now that was after my time. And
but I'll never forget that ladder they had that rolled along, and you could climb up it and get shoes all the way to the ceiling.
And you know, Ray, they had those in cities at that time.
Yeah.
And I do know when I got off the train, I was surprised to see street lights. And then the next morning, they had paved sidewalks. And I noticed in a little clipping here, of older clipping, it said that they had street lights and they had lights and the paved streets before anybody in Marshall County.
Yeah, well, that's quite a record for Hardin.
That is. That's good. You take a place this size now, it's something to talk about. Oh, and while I was in the store, I'll have to tell this too. The salesmen would all come in just about 12 o'clock. And I was downstairs getting ready to go to lunch, I think, and I said to one salesman, why do you all come here at this time of day every time? They said, we bypass Paducah, We bypassed Murray, we bypassed Benton to get to eat at the Warren boarding
Hotel,
house.
yeah. I remember that one real well.
Yeah.
Miss Gardner, you were always an amazing lady to me.
Oh, how so?
Well, for one thing, you were a performer, and we saw you in
Okay.
musicals and plays and so forth. And when I was in high school, you and I were in a play together.
That's right. We were. I don't remember the name of it, but
Neither
I
do I.
remember that we were in the play together.
Now, one other thing that I remember, and this jumps ahead and we'll have to go back, but before I forget it, I believe you came here and you had not completed your high school work.
That's right.
And then you did finish your work
Mm-hmm.
and you were graduated in the class of, was it 44?
44.
1944.
Mhm.
That was always remarkable to me also.
Well,
how did the kids accept you?
Ray, they were wonderful. They were so sweet to me, and any way I could help them, I was glad to do it. And you see, I came from a family of teachers. My mother, father, and the 3 sisters all taught. Then I had a niece that taught too. And I had to you had to get a certificate. I came from a very strict school. They were very strict with us. And you had to get a certificate to teach before you started that about your 8th grade. I got my certificate, my first one. The more I thought about that, I thought that's not for me. My father was a railroad conductor, and I think I inherited a little bit of
the
wanting to travel a little bit.
Like on the Charles Kuralt program I saw last night, the man loved steam locomotives. Well, how in the world did you ever hear about a job in Hardin?
Well, that has been a mystery to nearly everyone, I think. But you see, Ray, we went to a wholesale house. I went to Nashville, L. Jonas and Company. And then you take merchants like Mr. Midget. He came there, and he selected his milliner. They took you, even your salesman, before you went into business, they took you to lunch to see your table manners. They looked for every little thing. And he came, and he asked me if I would like to come up here. I told him would. He took me out to dinner. And I didn't know what I was getting into, of course. But I had been there. Well, that's how come me to be in Hardin.
Well, that's a perfectly reasonable explanation.
And somebody said, how do they judge you? I said, just like they do everything, just like they do judging a horse, only they don't ask you to open your mouth and see your teeth.
You've been around trade day enough to know what they did.
Oh, me, I'd heard it.
My dad was so good at that, incidentally, that
Well,
he
Mr. Gardner was too, you
could
know.
tell the age of a horse.
Oh, he could too.
Now, you were unmarried when you came here.
Oh, yeah.
About how old were you then?
Oh, 16.
Uh-huh.
Now, Ray?
Well, okay. I was just going to ask you about your marriage.
Well, I came here in 1922. And you see, we'd stay 3 months, then we'd go back home, then come to the millinery, back to the Nashville, and take a little more training there. Come out like for the fall season or the spring season.
You had to make a buying trip too, didn't you?
Oh, yes, we did that. We bought that before we came for these little places, you know. And so I bought, and Mr. Midget helped me buy some of what he thought would go over here, you know. So we just hit it off fine, and then I came back in the second season, and see, I didn't waste any time. In 1923, we married.
Yeah.
But I didn't think when I came to Hardin this would be my home.
You didn't realize you'd be here
Oh,
so many
no.
years and
No,
so
I didn't.
permanently. You have, Mr. Gardner had some children.
Yeah, I started to say I had a ready-made family, and I took an interest in the school right away there, you see, by having the children. because that had been impressed on me ever since I was little. School. But see, how come he, let me go back to this, how come he quit school? My father died, and I came in from school one day, and my mother was crying. Well, I never could stand that. And I just said to myself, I'm not going back. She said, oh, yes, you are. I said, no, I'm not going back. And that was where I quit my school. So I was a dropout there, and that wasn't very nice, and I didn't like the name of it either. But anyhow, I took this interest in school. And now, as well as I remember, I couldn't remember but 3 teachers that taught in the school over here. I noticed they called that a common school then. And Brother White was the principal. Did you ever know him?
Johnny White.
Yes.
I remember. He was rather old man, but I can remember.
And Jack Wells was a teacher, and Layla Fitz.
And he was a speller.
Oh, he was now.
Yeah. Well, I remember Boris Utley saying to me one time that Johnny White was principal, and he was always aggravating Brother White some way.
I think they all did.
And he said, Brother White said, Boris, you and I are going to lock horns one of these days.
That sounds just like him. But anyhow, then, that in 1924, Mrs. Lois Waterfield was teaching here.
Oh, that's Harry Lee's mother. Did Harry Lee ever
He
go
was
to school
going
here?
to school here, yeah. He was in Hazel's class.
Now, that was Mr. Gardner's daughter, your stepdaughter.
Yeah. So she came one day. I went. She asked me if I'd come over there. She asked me if I'd help her organize a PTA, and I said, "Law, Miss Lois, I'll do all I can." But I said, "You tell me what you want done, I'll try to do it." So we did. We organized the PTA, and we had a darn good one too.
Yes. First PTA in Hardin.
That's right. And, you know, then after the school burned, the new building that they put up, you know, they didn't have enough brick to finish the gym. Of course, the gym was very important to us, you know.
Yeah.
And they said, the county, see, we'd gone back on the county then. They said, well,
You were a city school from, I believe, 1910 till...
in 1910, I think.
Till 1937, when the building burned, and then the county took it over.
Yeah. Well, then, anyhow, that they asked them what we could do, and they said, well, if you could get some used brick and clean them, we'll try to put the gym. So I don't know whether the county helped us do that, but anyhow, we got the
I think
brick.
it was all volunteer labor.
Oh, I know it was. The men, I wish you could see them sitting over there in that hot sun, scraping those bricks, you know. And that was what put the walls up to the gym. Well, then we opened the school, and we didn't have a floor. They weren't able to put the floor in there. So the PTA went to work. And we drove all over. Anybody that would
My mother gave a bunch of chickens.
anybody that had children coming to school here, we went to them. I had future children coming, you know. So we went to them, and you know, a lot of women don't keep money around the house, and especially when they don't want to.
No.
So I went up to one house, and I said, oh, we're working for the school, and I said, I understand you have children coming there, yes. And I said, well, we wanted to know if you would contribute as much even as $1. We'll take 1,000 if you want to give it, but I said, we will take the $1. Well, she didn't have the money. And I looked around and I saw those big old fat hens going around out there, you know. I said, what about a hen? Would you give a hen? And I could see her laughing behind her eyes, you know. She said, if you can catch it. I said, any special one? She said, no. I ran that old hen down. I got her. And we did that.
Yeah.
Now, that's what put the floor in that gym, I
Yes.
was saying. Now, we worked in unison.
I know you worked hard.
And I'll tell you another thing, Ray. They just charged 25 cents to belong to the PTA.
Yeah.
But the men were just as interested in as the women.
Mhm.
We had a good one. And we worked, and we did do a lot of good.
Now I was a sophomore in high school that year when you were doing that.
Yeah.
It was the school year of 37, 38. And you had a son
Yeah.
in school,
Joe.
little behind me, about 2 years behind me, I think.
Joe.
Now, he still lives in Marshall County.
Yeah, he lives at Aurora.
I believe I noticed he was in the fire department, volunteer
He's
fire.
quite active out there, and I'm thrilled to death over it.
He's going in Mama's
I
footsteps.
hope so. I hope so. In
Yeah.
some ways.
He also was on the debate team when I
Yes.
was here. And
Yeah. I kind of encouraged that. I never figured that he was really a, outstanding debater, but I wanted him to get the feel of public life. And that,
I think it helped all of us
Yeah, it
speaking
did.
in high school. Yeah.
I did. I tell you another thing, Ray. They had plays then. We gave plays to put that floor down and everything else. But they had plays, and people attended. Anything they had to do, we had pie suppers. We just had everything. And it really went over.
Weren't you a rather noted singer in your...
I did sing. God was good to me. He gave me a good voice. But I don't now.
Well,
Somehow down the line, it doesn't do just like it used to.
well, old Father Time takes
Yeah,
care of
I
a
like
number
to
of
do
things,
that,
of course.
and I like to, I write little skits for the homemakers and Eastern Star.
Tell us what Mr. Gardner did for a living.
Oh, Mr. Gardner, I believe I noticed, now he came into this in 1910, and he was a manure carrier on Route 2,
Mm-hmm.
and Mr. Henry Gardner had Route 1.
They were brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And they carried that, but I believe I noticed in one of those write-ups that it started back in the rural route started in 1800, I believe it said, somewhere in 1800.
Well, it was almost 1900, as I remember, when the first RFD Act was passed.
Well, I had just forgotten, I wouldn't know where it was that now, but anyhow, that doesn't make any difference.
Uh-huh.
Then another thing that I've been listening to some of your stories, and I thought about they've never mentioned that we had a cannery here at one time.
No, I don't remember ever having heard that.
Oh, we had a cannery, and there it is.
Yes.
And you've never seen as much stuff canned in your life. Now, I know that was in World War II, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you'll have to use, where sugar was rationed, said put just a little Caro syrup in your peaches. Now, if you want some good eating, that's for the birds. They can have that. And then Ewan Mathis was the depot agent when I came here. And they had quite a section, you know, this was a railroad place here.
In other words, it was one of the branch headquarters and the section foreman, and there were a number of houses owned then by...
Oh, yeah. And Daddy Heineman was the section foreman.
on
Now,
the
what his name was, I don't know. They called him Daddy.
NC and St. L Railway, I remember that.
Yeah. Oh, I can see that, too. And another thing that they have mentioned, now Mr. Gardner told me about this. This wasn't in my time. But they had the undertaking parlor, And Andy Faircloth made the casket.
I'd never heard that before.
Well, he did.
I've heard my dad say there was a 10-cent store here. There was
Oh,
a
yeah.
drugstore. At some period there, I
Now
don't know the
that
exact
picture
dates.
show?
There was a movie,
And the photography.
a photographic studio.
And well, I
And
think you could
I
get.
have seen a copy of a newspaper print here. In fact, there were two different ones.
Hmm.
The Marshall County Messenger and the Hardin Star.
Oh, is that right? Well, now, I believe the Star went out, I believe that went out right after I came. They sold to Murray.
They sold to the Murray Ledger and Times
Mm-hmm.
in 1931, I believe I read somewhere.
Oh, and another thing I wanted to tell you was those doctors' names. You've heard of the
Oh,
six
yes.
doctors.
Mhm.
Dr. Gus Covington
Mhm.
and Dr. Euclid Covington, his son,
I remember both of them.
and Dr. Irvin
Hughes.
Hughes.
Now that is my mother's second cousin, I believe it
Yeah,
was.
he was our doctor too. And Dr. Caulfield. Now those were there when I came here.
Mhm.
But soon after that, Dr. Euclid Covington went to Murray.
Yes.
I have an idea he thought he'd further himself up into hospitalization or something like that. And then a Dr. Casper came, and then a Dr. Cornell.
I don't remember the latter two for some reason.
Well, now,
of course,
Doc-
we moved away from here.
Dr. Casper, they were just a little up and up, you know.
Hmm.
And I imagine he wanted to get in a better place than this.
It
so he
seems to
didn't
me
live
that
long.
I've heard my dad say there was once a Dr. Russell here.
Now that was before I came.
John Russell's father, the
Mhm.
man who is in the Paducah First
Yeah.
National Bank.
Now Mr. Gardner knew him well, and they had a produce store, and George Trevathan
Yes.
ran that, you know. And then they had two blacksmith shops. And that was John Perry and John Griffin.
Yes, I can remember Griffin's blacksmith
I
shop.
can just hear that whang, whang, whang.
And later, of course, Houston and Reddick Pace.
They took that over
And,
later.
there were three here when I was about 1930 because one was Claude MacDonald.
And Crater, yeah. Don't beat her.
That's right. That's what this is his nickname.
And Crater Edwards was a barber.
That, yeah.
And we had the shoe repair shop and Herbie Hurt. And of course we know of his sad demise.
He was the one that was kidnapped, taken away
That's
from the
right.
bank one morning.
That was
We
He was such a nice fellow. I really hated that.
I can remember Mr. Booker at the bank, and of course it operated, I guess, up till about 1935 or so.
Yeah, there was, let's see, Dr. Hughes was one of the,
He was a president.
yeah.
Booker was
And
cashier.
Booker and Regina Pace
Yes.
worked in there. And now it was in that bank that's where the Herbie was taken away, you know.
Mhm.
But I don't know, I just thought that was a sad thing that had to happen here.
All right, you came here on the train.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember anything about your first airplane?
Well, yeah, I went from Detroit, Michigan to New York.
Were you on a buying trip for the store?
No,
Probably?
no, I was just visiting them,
Uh-huh.
visiting the children. No, that was quite different.
Tell us about the churches here when you.
Oh, yeah. Now, the Methodist Church had just completed their new church. They had the first brick. here in
Beautiful
Harvard.
building, and it had the Greek pillars in front, like
Yeah,
a courthouse or public building. I thought that was a a beautiful building.
It was a nice building.
In
And
fact, it essentially still stands there today.
oh, yes. Yes, they still have that. And now that you're talking about me, I came from a family of teachers, as I told you, and my mother was a teacher. And Ray, she taught the blueback speller. So when we went to school, besides that, we were taught a lot like that, but it wasn't a blueback.
Mm-hmm.
But she'd have us at home. There were 4 of us girls, and she'd have us at home spell, and spell out that blueback.
Yeah. That went back to Noah Webster, about 1800. But a lot of people still use it, just as I bought my daughter a set of McGuffey's readers. Now, they're way out of date,
That's
but
what I
they're
studied.
still good.
I'll date myself. But anyhow, I never did go to just what they call the one-room school.
Uh-huh.
We went to a private school one year. I remember I didn't like that because I like more people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been my life. I love people. I like to be with them. I like to meet new people. And you're back to the stage business. That really has always appealed to me. To do things, I love the public, and if I'm pleasing them, I like to see a live audience. I don't think I'd like anything, the other, but pictures, anything like that. But I like a live audience where I can see them and see how they react to what you're doing,
I think I've heard a rumor that the first electric plant in the county was at Hardin, and was installed maybe around 1912 or so. When I can first remember, they ran the electric plant only at night and
That's what I've heard.
and on Tuesday.
Now, I have heard that.
So it was ironing day.
Yeah. Oh, me. Like a friend of mine, she said, well, you can go back to the old days, good old days, but said, don't go back to the washboard.
All right. Well, Ms. Gardner, it's the half hour has gone fairly rapidly.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
We want you to say any wrap-up things you'd like. We got about another minute if you want to.
Well, Ray, all I'd like to say is I came to Hardin. I was a stranger. And Hardin is a small place, but I love it. And I love to be here, and I love the people. And I think that we need to get behind our town more now and do more for the town than we are doing. And if we had a PTA like we had then, we'd do it.
It took something out of the place when the school left, I
When
thought.
you take your school out of your community, you've lost something. Now, I'm ashamed to say this, but the school to me now is just nothing because I have no children coming in. I'm interested in it, but it isn't that. There's just something gone there.
Yes.
And it's sad in a way when they do it. Well, I know there's better advantages, and that's good for the children. We wouldn't have bands and things like they have there. But another thing I think about schools, we had the advantage of being in plays and things like that. Our children don't get that now. And Ray, they need public appearances.
Very true. I agree with you so much. And Miss Gardner, I'm sorry our time's about gone. This has been the Oral History Program presented by WCBL Shelby McCallum owner. Copies may be found eventually at the Marshall County Library, the Murray State Library, and the State Archives in Frankfort. We return you now to our studios.